I call from a 916 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? How many times have you called in?
I've never called in before. This is Billy from Sacramento. I am actually originally.
Good job.
I'm originally from Baltimore, so it's fun hearing someone from there before. I am she/her trans, and I wanted to talk about what hormones are doing to my body and how ridiculous it is for this sports debate.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, one thing you can tell from my voice is that dumping estrogen in me doesn't change my voice. Any trans woman you hear with a feminine voice, she's putting in work, so give her respect for that.
Okay.
But also, I'm not just doing estrogen. I have to take testosterone blockers, and testosterone in a man's body naturally keeps up the muscle tone. And without that, I'm much weaker. I have like no stamina whatsoever, and I have to put in the work to keep that up at all. When there's a trans woman in sports, she's busting her ass to even be there.
Mm-hmm. And can I ask, your name's Billy, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Billy, what age were you when you started your hormone therapy?
I'm actually pretty new. I started about 8 months ago.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask what age range you are at right now?
I'm 44.
44. Gotcha. Yeah.
And it's different it's different when you start very young, but a lot of us do start older, and a lot of us go through a huge downswing for this stuff.
This is why it's so important to start this at a young age, for kids to have access to this. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yes. No, you're completely right. It's super important for kids to, like, I wish I had known. I wish I had understood, so I understood who and what I was, so that I could have possibly started something earlier. But it is definitely important for kids to start this early so that they can live their lives completely normal and not go through the difficulties later in life. Even with my voice, it's amazing how much I can dress and quote unquote pass, but as soon as I say something, like I'm walking by somebody and I say excuse me and they hear my voice, whole different attitude. It's very frustrating. But I also want to thank you, and especially you, Emma, for what you've been doing lately and what you've been saying lately, including what happened with the other network that makes things very difficult to continue to support because their chats are really toxic now to people like me.
I'm sorry to hear that.
But,
yeah, me too.
Yeah. It sucked.
Billy, let me ask you this. I mean, your decision to transition was just because you wanted all the benefits that trans people get in society, obviously, and it was obviously just because of something you saw on TV or something. But honestly, how early in your life, and you just mentioned that you weren't aware of your options. How early in your life did you feel like there was something wrong? And then when did you become aware that trans people were a thing?
I became aware of trans people as a thing as an adult, even as a kid. Especially once I became aware of who I am, I constantly looked back and be like, oh, that explains this line of thought, that explains, little TMI, but I've always dissociated during sex, and I didn't realize what was going on. I was like, why can't I keep my mind on this? Why can't I keep my mind on this? And it caused a lot of ED issues. Stuff like that has always been there. I used to be married. I also had a lot of conversations with her about what I would do if I transitioned my body, just casual conversations without fully understanding what was going on in my head. And it's not always something that you like you feel it, but you don't know what it is. And like for me, I fought most of my life trying to be what people thought a man should be. I tried to be what a man should be in a relationship, and it didn't work. It never really worked, and it felt like shit.
When was the first time that you were aware that something was off?
I mean, I feel like I always knew. But
like when you were like a little kid, like was it like when do you remember an incident like when you were, if there was one?
I mean, I wanted to play with my sister's Barbies when they weren't around. I sat down to pee as soon as I was left alone in a bathroom. Like stuff like that. Just like I always knew that I can always remember forcing myself to sit less feminine.
Yeah.
So when did you start to feel like was there? I assume that if you're making yourself sit less feminine, there's some element of shame that you're feeling at that time. Like like when did that, like how prominent was that in
the feeling of shame?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I could say when it was, because it just always was. It's like, so I'm from Baltimore. I'm black, and black communities tend to be more conservative. So it was always like, you got to be like this. You got to be like a boy.
In terms of masculinity.
One of the things I'm feeling
right.
Yeah, one of the things I feel right now is like, so in Sacramento, my best friend's still living in Baltimore, and he's still dealing with like the forced masculinity. Even though he's not trans, he still feels like he has to be a certain way, or people will give him grief about it.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff's always like, it's hard for me to answer that question because I couldn't pinpoint a time when. I can pinpoint a lot of times in my adult life when I really started to understand things.
Right.
But I can't really pinpoint a moment in childhood because I just know it was always there.
Right.
Do you think that if right now we're going through a particularly difficult time, I think, in terms of like trans acceptance, because there's an active, massive portion of society that is trying to demonize trans people. But do you think if there was a greater awareness 20 years ago when you were in your early 20s, do you think you would have transitioned earlier? Or do you think
yes.
Okay.
So honestly, I really wish that as awful as the world is right now, as awful as the world is towards trans people, this experience is amazing. This experience is fantastic. And I feel like so many people could learn so much from listening to people that, for one thing, have been on both sides of having these hormones in our heads. Like, I can't tell you the benefit to my mental health being on estrogen has given me. This clarity of thought, this breadth of emotion, this feeling like myself and not feeling like I'm overly charged. Like even my own sister says, I don't sound angry anymore. And I didn't even realize how much I had sounded like just tense and angry all the time. If people knew more about the actual experience of transitioning, I feel like people would. I just wish people would listen more instead of just being so angry and hateful. And even the people that are on our side, I wish would listen more instead of making their own assumptions and like, hey, and this is what the science says. I'm like, does the science say that, or do you think it says that? There's.
Well, I mean, what you started this call with is exactly what I think a lot of advocates have been trying to say, but it is the image is being conjured in people's minds on purpose by right-wing commentators is like they use LeBron. If LeBron tomorrow decided that he wanted to transition, would you let LeBron into the WNBA or whatever? And like, obviously, this is, I mean, well, yes. And then
WNBA may be like, well, let's look at how this transition goes, and we might want a big earner to come help.
honestly, yeah.
Right. Like, I go ahead.
No. I mean, the point is just that it is a series of multiple frickin' layers of bullshit that you have to wade through to get to the reality that you describe, which is that even though you're in your 40s and you're transitioning right now, the effects of your therapy it nullifies so much of like the scaremongering that the right brings up about women's sports. But of course, that's the point of it.
They don't care. They don't care.
They don't
care about.
I know.
They don't care about physicality at all.
Caller, the other thing that
I'm sorry.
I just want to pick up on something. You talk about how like positive this experience is for you. I have a friend who socially transitioned to he/they recently, and wasn't experienced necessarily like gender dysphoria, but upon like having that realization, which was sparked in part by like certain questions we had like perform, and he had about himself. A non-binary person assigned female at birth came up to him at a concert and assumed he was non-binary. And he was and he liked that assumption, and spent the next few months like exploring that. And like when you actually see that happen for somebody, it takes all this mystification and all this all these reactionaries that are in their cloistered little reactionary. They're never going to experience knowing someone like that because they hate them out of their lives.
That's what we call a gender euphoria moment, and when those hit, they are amazing. The first time I had other women approach me without me explaining anything about myself and treat me like a woman was amazing. I remember I was at my dispensary talking. The first thing I did to express my femininity outdoors was my fingernails because I'm good at painting. And I was in a conversation with the woman behind the counter, and when it got to the fact that I was trans, I got to watch her entire demeanor change, and she let down the guard that she does when she's just talking to a random man and started talking to me as a woman. And it was like the highlight of my month and year, and I will never forget it, or moments like that. Those moments are the most amazing things in the world when this is getting answers to questions we didn't know we had.
That's fascinating.
And having these things resolved are just, it's like I said, it is an amazing experience. And if the world weren't so shitty, it would just be grand as hell. It's just
absolutely
so frustrating.
And it tears families apart because my friend is not going to be able to share that part of his, new understanding of his identity with the family that loves him in Minnesota because they've been poisoned away from any kind of understanding like that. And that is why I can't stand when people treat this like it's some sort of intramural, like abstract thing. Like this is actively causing an intense amount of harm for people.
Yeah. I'm lucky in that my family, they don't fully get it. They really don't. But they try. They try, and they still love me, and they support me. They're 3,000 miles away, which is not the most fun thing, but I'm lucky with that. I'm lucky I have a ton of support. I have professional voice actor friends that are going to be helping me with my voice. Like, I'm very, very lucky with the support that I have, and it scares me that there are so many people that don't have any of that.
Well, Billy,
and I just wanted to say thank you for taking this call because there's not a lot of trans callers, and I feel like this kind of stuff needs to be heard more. The positivity of what we go through and what it does for us and those around us. And like I took my first selfie that I ever liked not too long ago, and my neighbors who see me every day, they saw that and they were like, "That's cute." But everyone who hadn't seen me in a while, like when I put it online, they were like, "You look so relaxed. You look happy." It was night and day for them to see how much better I am as me than what I was.
Billy, really appreciate the call. Thank you so much.
Thank you for taking it.
Call in anytime.